So today's podcast, we're talking with Sara Duff from Smart Quality, an ISO consultancy simplifying ISO standards for their software. Hello, Sara.
Hello there, Richard. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good, thank you. Busy as always, and obviously, like we've always spoke, you're non-stop as it is.
That's right. It doesn't change.
So, welcome to the podcast. So, as questions start, Sara, for someone new to ISO, how would you explain what it is and why it matters?
Okay. So ISO, yes, it can be a bit of a black art, and people are trying to understand what it's all about and whether there's a value to their business. So ISO, to start with, stands for the International Organization for Standardization. So it's a non-political organization based in Geneva with a member per country. So BSI, the British Standards Institute, is the member for the UK. And basically what the organisation does is create a number of standards in areas like quality, environmental management, health and safety, data security, and a whole host of others that effectively sets, say, if you like, a benchmark or a framework for best practice in specific areas. So if we take as an example the most sort of widely adopted and implemented ISO standard, which is the quality management standard, ISO 9001. It's been adopted now by about 1 million companies, and it is a really, really good, solid foundation framework for any organisation. Whether it's a one-man band, and we have fairly recently implemented ISO 9001 for a single-man company who wants to start working in the public sector, and therefore his clients actually want to see that he's got a solid set of foundations in his business in terms of being able to consistently deliver the right level of service to his clients. So ISO 9001 enables a company to basically deliver that confidence, if you like, to those customers or prospects that they have, that they're going to be able to consistently, they've got the right methodology, the right framework in place to be able to consistently deliver the right level of service or the right level of quality of products if they're a manufacturing company. But also it enables that company to basically drive improved efficiency, reduce costs, and basically get everybody in the organisation working from the same hymn sheet effectively. So internal reasons and external reasons for actually implementing ISO standards.
Yeah, good. I was going to ask you, what's the biggest challenge they face when trying to implement these?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies possibly don't understand. They tend to sort of see that ISO certificate maybe on, is on someone's reception wall, or they see it on someone's website, and they tend to see the end result, which is the certificate. And a lot of them don't realise the underlying work that needs to be done to put the management system in place, to do all of the internal audits, the management review, so they're in a position to go forward to attain that certification. So I think a lot of it is that sort of lack of education initially. Secondly, I think there are a lot of companies who perhaps, go onto the, ISO website, they start perhaps looking at what's involved in that standard. And if you think about the fact that ISO standards have been built and developed by committees of ISO consultants, it's probably not in their interest to make that language easy to understand. So sometimes the interpretation of what you actually need to do. And we also see a lot of companies who have had an attempt to build, for example, a quality management system to attain ISO 9001, and it's over-documented, it's bureaucratic, they're just creating more and more information that, and the more information you create under document control for ISO 9001, the more you have to maintain and do your internal audits on. So that's another challenge of overcomplicating and trying to tie your business down so much with so many different policies, so many different processes and procedures. So there's a much more simpler way of doing it, which is what we focus on. Is yes, you've got to have a management system that's compliant with the requirements of the standard. It needs to be bespoke to your business, so it is a business support tool. It will drive continuous improvement, but also it's as simple, as flexible as possible, so that it's easier to maintain.
Right. So it's definitely something that people need to watch and make sure there's not really face a challenge, do they? So you cover standards like ISO 9001, 14001, 45,001, 27,001. How do businesses know what's right for them?
Yeah, and it is a challenge. Sometimes it's a lot of the reason that people are looking at ISO standards is because they're opened up a tender, they're looking to work in the public sector. And then in that scenario, it is very clear, right, we need you to hold ISO 9001, ISO 27001, ISO 14001. And then that's prescribed to them. Therefore, if they want to respond to that tender or they want to work with those clients, but often companies aren't sure. Normally, 99% of companies, if they're starting on that ISO journey, they would start with the quality management system. As I mentioned earlier, it is a really good, solid business management framework for any organisation, irrespective of the size of the company and the sector the company is in. But we're seeing more in terms of manufacturing companies who are looking at the environmental management system standard, ISO 14001, health and safety. As far as ISO 27001, I will say this, we do try and put in the right way, put people off from going down that route. The reason is there's an awful lot of work required. It's a 6-month, project. For a lot of companies that we always recommend get the basics like Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, in at least to give you the foundations. For some companies, ISO 27001, much as it, is a nice to have, isn't essential and critical. So we try as consultants to give some advice if companies are unclear about which route or which particular ISO standard or standards they need.
Right, and is there a kind of big difference between how much paperwork or how much is involved between each one? Or
Yeah.
is some easier to get than others?
Yeah, so ISO 9001 and ISO, for those companies who are looking for ISO 9001, we normally say, think of it as a 3-month project from starting to look at what systems and processes, a bit of a gap analysis, through to us helping them to build the management system and doing that first set of internal audits and chairing the management review so they're ready to go forward for their external certification audit. For 14,001, similarly 3 months. And for a lot of companies, they've already have ISO 9001. I've had a company this morning has 9001, but now because of tenders, they need 14,001. So we would build that onto the 9001 as an integrated management system. But normally if we're putting in 9 and 14 together, we normally say, think of it as a 3 to 4 month project. If we're putting the trio, so 9, 14 and 45, we would say that's a 4-month if we're building the 3 as an integrated management system. Whereas, as I mentioned, for ISO 27001, we'll think of that as a 6-month project. The same if we're looking at some of the more niche standards. So if we're looking at aerospace, AS9100, or we're looking at medical devices, 13485, which are quality management standards for the aerospace and medical devices, there is a lot of additional work on top. And again, we would say for those standards, think of that as a 6-month project as well.
Right. So you normally go into these businesses and say, we're going to do 9001, but we can also add this at the same time?
Yeah, so we would say to a company, we've got a company at the moment, they're a manufacturing company in Wales, and they want to do more work with the aerospace industry. So they've been asked about AS9100, but their 9001 system, how can I put it politely, probably does need quite a lot of work being done to it. So we said, rather than us coming in to put AS9100 on a system that probably isn't fit for, this is their words, isn't fit for purpose for 9001, let's rebuild the 9001 so it's really a solid foundation for when we come to build AS91 on top.
Right, okay. So the other one I was going to ask is, obviously you've just said that this business is in Wales. Do you work across the country, or is it just certain areas? Or
we do work quite across the piece, from Scotland down to Cornwall to Wales to Northern Ireland. We've had a couple of approaches from US companies and one from, we did do some work with a company that had parent company was in Australia. The subsidiary organisation with whom we were engaged was in the UK. And actually it's quite interesting that ISO consultancy rates outside of the UK, in particular locations like Australia and the US, are significantly higher than they are here in the UK. So they engaged us to obviously save themselves some money. But we're pretty busy just dealing with the UK at the moment. We'll be reactive rather than proactive in other geographies.
I can imagine there's so many businesses in the UK, let alone the UK manufacturing industry. We've got 100,000 manufacturers, let alone the other kind of businesses you work with as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the other sort of key thing about going back sort of to that first question you asked me about people knowledge of ISO standards. We've had companies who are not in manufacturing or construction, but in other industry sectors saying, oh, we're not really sure if ISO standards are really relevant for us because we're not in construction or manufacturing. So there's a bit of an education because ISO standards, yes, there are an awful lot of construction companies and manufacturing and engineering companies who have adopted ISO standards, but the standards, are not pertinent to any industry sector, so they're relevant for all sectors. But yeah, sometimes there's a lack of education on that front.
So you just basically cleared up my next question, which was about sectors. What sectors, obviously, do you work in mainly? But if you cover all sectors, or
Yeah,
do you have a priority in a certain area?
well, through the other side of our business, smart manufacture, obviously we have a huge degree of experience and network in manufacturing. So we do a lot of work with manufacturing companies, but equally we do a lot of work with the construction sector. But fairly recently we've worked with energy management companies, education services companies, IT companies, cybersecurity companies, so insurance companies. So we really have got quite a breadth. And obviously sometimes it's quite good to work cross sector because we can bring best practice in terms of certain core areas from one industry sector into another. Yeah, I think it's quite advantageous from an ISO consultancy perspective that we do have that cross sector knowledge that we can there.
So you might be able to find, obviously, yes, something that works better in a certain industry might be able to bring it across as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at companies, when we first go in and we look at what existing processes and systems they have, so to sort of give them a mini gap analysis, if you like, sometimes they've got a specific process or procedure or policy in a certain area, and we say which they've been using for some time. But if we feel that there's a better way of doing things, then obviously that's something that we can share with them.
Good. So how does your software make it easier for businesses to stay compliant?
Yeah, so we have a lot of companies who are exploring, digital, let's call them quality management or compliance platforms. And I think it's not right for every business. So we have a lot of companies that are very happy with the likes of SharePoint. Most people have got a Microsoft world, and they're used to SharePoint. That's where a lot of their core company documents reside. So that's fine. We would build that management system within their existing SharePoint. But equally, we have companies, and it's probably the bigger companies. It's probably companies that have multiple standards, and not just multiple ISO standards, but they have lots of other areas of compliance, whether it's customer regulatory compliance, and therefore they need a platform that helps them manage that wider sort of compliance area. And that is where we do work with several platforms, dependent on what ISO standards, depending on what particular compliance, actually help them more, effectively manage that wider compliance piece. Masses of Excel spreadsheets, masses of Word documents and emails. Yeah, that software tends to be more suited to bigger companies, if I'm honest.
And obviously, you said earlier on, it can be from a one-man band right up to hundreds of employees.
Yeah, so again, that's it. We have companies that say, I met a construction company not too long ago, actually, almost all female construction company, which was quite interesting, and they differentiate on that basis. And she said, I said, yeah, something that we'll look at when we're bigger. And so I said, how many employees? We're 9 employees. And I quoted the example of the one-man design and engineering consultant. So again, I think that's a bit of a myth that you have to be a certain size or in a certain industry sector.
No, yeah, it helps with everyone really. I suppose it's just dependent on your customer base, doesn't it? If your customer base actually wants you to have these standards, then you can have it at any time.
Yeah, no, we did when we lived in Bristol. We were doing quite a lot of work with the Rolls-Royce supply chain, and we had suppliers who, were said to us, we absolutely have to have ISO 9001 or we can't work with Rolls-Royce. We had other suppliers that were saying, well, we've been working with Rolls-Royce for years, we've never had an issue. So again, these supply chain organisations, it depends on the type of business you're doing and where you fit in that supply chain as to whether it's mandatory, it's desirable. But equally, we have a lot, especially in the construction sector, where we have companies who maybe they've got the sort of SSIP schemes like, Safe Contractor or Chaz or Achilles. There's a number of these where it's you fill out a checklist, who then find they want to go into bigger companies and they need those ISO standards. But some of them have said to us it hasn't actually so far prohibited us from engaging with those clients, but because we don't have ISO 9001 or 14 or 45, we've had to compensate for that and have to fill in so many, questionnaires and forms, which we have to do every single time, whereas going forward, once we have ISO 914, 45, we'll be straight through, and that's going to save us a huge amount of time and cost, because those companies already know that we've already got those credentials, because we've had to have them in order to gain our certification.
Yeah, I think more and more companies now are wanting, obviously, their standards. They're wanting to net zero. They want every company to be able to have all these different kind of standards and qualities, don't they? So, throughout, I know suppliers in the automotive industry that are already looking for suppliers that have to be net zero or working towards net zero, and some of these standards as well. So.
And I think there is confusion with people come to us and we say, well, yes, we can help you with ISO 14001, but then you've got things like B Corp, which is very, very different. But again, sometimes these companies will have ISO 14001. They'll also have B Corp, because different clients and different customers recognise and have different sets of requirements. So yes, it can be a confusing piece. And
that's is it just like a 1100 and Joscar? Is it something like that?
Yeah. So you've got Joscar. In fact, actually, my Richard was talking to me today about, should we be looking at Joscar ourselves as a business? And I said, well, funny enough, I have looked at that, but it's just going to take the time, to fill out all of the documentation that we need to have. It's a bit like SC clearance for defence. We are looking at that at the moment. We've got one consultant in the team that is SC cleared. But we're looking whether we need to extend that at the moment.
So always things to kind of add on to what you already do.
Yeah, but then it's time it takes to go through that sort of process. And we're doing a fair bit of work actually in the defence industry. We belong to a couple of these regional defence and security clusters, and so we gained about 4 or 5 defence clients. So we've learned quite a lot about defence in the last few months.
Well, it's been worth joining these different groups as well then.
Absolutely, they've been great for us, and then we've started working with, as I said, 4 or 5, and then we had a call yesterday, which is a proposal I have to get out this evening, for another company that's just been recommended to use us by one of these defence companies. Yeah, what was some tight time frames to work with them to get them ready for their certification.
Right. Do you have any success stories for where ISO has made a big difference in any
Yeah, I'll give you 2 very different examples. So the one thing about ISO standards normally is it's a B2B proposition. So, if I'd argue if you're a domestic window cleaner, would ISO 9001 really help your business? No, because if I'm looking at window cleaner, the last thing I'm probably interested in is what ISO standards they hold. So it tends to be a B2B proposition. But this particular example is a company that provides domestic appliances insurance. So, for example, if you go into Currys or AO.com and you buy a fridge freezer or a washing machine and you want to take out that extended manufacturer's warranty, then you can pay for an appliance insurance service. So this particular company is a leader in that. They happen to be quite spookily round the corner from where we're based, so not the other end of the country as usual. And it's quite interesting when I had the call with their compliance manager, and this is he basically said that the reason they wanted ISO 9001 is because they'd had 5 years of very, very significant growth. They could see that continuing over the next 5 years, and as they've grown, they've got a process in here, a system over there, another procedure here, but nothing was joined up. And he said, I've got 2 choices. I can either start from scratch and build this unified structure and do this work myself. But why would I, and this is his exact phrase, when there's a perfectly good framework out there called ISO 9001? I want ISO 9001. So we helped put that structure in, basically giving that framework for that business then to get, and they've got about 100 employees, for them all to be working from that common framework and join the whole organisation up. which has made them enabled their scaling up and their continued growth and also not easier. One example from an internal reason, a strange example really, because it wouldn't have been a company that I'd have proactively gone after. So that's one interesting story. The other company that I can quote is a company that builds modular buildings for the NHS. So when you go into NHS car parks and you've got the buildings that house MRI scanners and imaging equipment, these guys build that. So they wanted to do much more work with they got in with a few trusts, but they wanted to do more work with the NHS. So having ISO 9001, 14001 and 45001 was becoming an increasing requirement. So we went in, it's up in Hull. Again, quite far away from where we are, but we basically put in an integrated management system covering those three standards. And that, as a result, has enabled them to grow their business with the NHS.
Wow. So it certainly works, and there's certainly reasons why businesses should start looking at getting these management systems as well.
Absolutely. There's got to be, like for any company, we always say, what's the driver? Is it internal reasons? Is it, that you want to, help you to scale up, get everybody in rather than a lot of information in the MD's head, and when they're bringing on new people, we had that with a security company where the MD said, just want to have a common framework for everybody to work from, and everybody knows what policies and procedures they need to work from, rather than when I'm out the office, everyone goes off piste. So that whether it's the internal reasons or it's companies that want to respond to tenders or get involved with bigger clients in the private sector, and certainly for the public sector, I would, say that anybody, unless they're very, 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 very niche and they've got no competition, and there's not that many businesses that are in that fortunate place, are going to need at least minimum ISO 9001 to work in the public sector.
Right. If someone wants to find you then, if someone wants to find Smart Quality or Smart Manufacturer, we'll touch on that in a minute, is where do they find you other than Google? Okay,
find me on LinkedIn. I know I'm the only Sara Duff in the UK with my orange logo and the orange glasses. You should find me. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can contact me via my email address, s.duff@smartquality.co.uk. So yeah, I'm very approachable. If there's a way that we can help that company, we're always happy to have that conversation.
You're also part of, obviously, ManufacturersHub, you're part of Connex. Is there any other groups you're part of as well?
Yeah, so belong to, as I mentioned, the regional defence and security clusters. We're a member of Farnborough Aerospace Consortium. We're also a member of Make UK, and we are also a member of our local chambers of commerce, the Hampshire Chamber of Commerce.
Quite a few places people can find you.
Absolutely, yeah.
You attend, obviously, we saw you this year actually, at Smart Manufacturer as well. Do you attend many events?
Yeah, we do. We've just, we've got a couple of, how would I describe them, sort of local, I call them city shows, where you get a local sort of organiser that brings in a bunch of local businesses, a bunch of local suppliers. They're on a very, very different scale than the big events at the NEC, but particularly on the ISO consultancy, we've done quite well with, meeting people who starting their ISO journey, they needed help, and they found us and we found them during those city shows. We then have, at the end of October, we have a stand. We're in the Connex area with the smart manufacture side of the business at Advanced Engineering, again back at the NEC. And then we've literally just signed up yesterday for the first big manufacturing show of the year, which is Southern Manufacturing at Farnborough. So that's slightly closer to home than the NEC for us. So yes, we do a lot of shows. We speak at events. So I'm speaking at a manufacturing event middle of September, locally for once, that's part of the Made Smarter Great Southwest programme. They've asked me to come and share my experiences of working with small manufacturing companies and ERP implementations. So that's all good.
Certainly busy, and certainly a lot of people. Would you recommend going to these events for other people, small businesses, or exhibiting or attending? Or
yeah, I think for any of these events, it's probably worthwhile, and we've done a lot of that with the big exhibitions, before you fork out the thousands, particularly because it is thousands if you want to exhibit at the NEC, for example, or the Southern Manufacturing as well, is always, I'd say, go and test the shows out, go and attend them as a visitor, walk around, talk to other exhibitors about their experience and get a feeling for whether you feel that show, has your target audience, and get some experience from the other exhibitors before you fork out a shed load of money to exhibit and then it disappoints you because you haven't done that research.
Some people we've spoken to and they've got loads out of the exhibitions, whereas others we've spoken to and they've had nothing. So it's a bit of you don't really know. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down.
Yeah, and I think also it can be a long-term goal as well. I mean, I'll give you an example from Smart Factory Expo because it's very timely because we visited them yesterday. We met a company. They seemed extremely keen to talk to us. They have an existing ERP system. It's not quite working for the business, so they wanted to come and pick our brains. They're very local to us, and they said, "We'll come and it'd be really good to come and for you to come round and you can see what around our operation." I think I sent them 5 emails. Richard, who'd also met them, 2 messages on LinkedIn, absolutely nothing. And that was since we met them in June. And then all of a sudden, from nowhere last week, I got an email back from the MD with not really explaining why it had been such a length of time, but very friendly. It said, "Can we have an immediate call?" We had a lovely call, bonded really well. We went to meet them yesterday and we're probably going to be working with them. So I think that is an example. Sometimes it can take quite some time. It's all in the follow-up. Sometimes things can happen. We signed with a company, we've already started working with them. We met them at the Smart Factory Expo. So it can be quick, but I think it's about expectation setting, and probably if you realise that it can sometimes take some time to get the follow through and to get business, it can be quick, but just have the right expectations when you go into these events would be my advice.
But sometimes it's better, isn't it? It's to have some obviously short, medium, longer. You're getting your work for the future, aren't you? Rather than everything comes at once and you can't handle it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As long as you follow up, I think that's the most important, because we've been to shows where we've expressed an interest in someone else's services and then they haven't followed up, and you think, wow, they put all that investment into a show and then they haven't taken the bait and then followed up with people who genuinely were interested in their services. Seems a bit bizarre to me.
Some of them it's probably just a necessity, really. We have to do it. We have to go to this show, and rather than actually, while we're doing it, so let's reap the benefits of while we're doing it.
Yeah, I think you have to have those goals, as to why you're going, whether it's for increased brand awareness, whether it's because, your competition is there and you feel you need to be seen, whether it is a lead generation, whatever the objectives are, have those, clearly set. I'd also say make sure that a lot of companies focus on the event itself. I would also say, obviously, as I mentioned, you've got to do the follow-up, but the pre-planning for the show, publicising your attendance and really making sure that you've maximised, your prospects that you've got. Make sure that we did that for Smart Factory Extra, make sure that everybody possibly that knew we were going to be there. And so we had 5 planned meetings of people that we'd been already engaged with. He said, "Oh, that's great. We can meet you." It's very convenient because we're in the West Midlands area. 1 or 2 of them were, a couple weren't. But they said, "Oh, that's great because we were probably going to go anyway, but now there's a reason to meet you guys." So I think maximise the pre-event. Obviously, during the event, make sure that you're really maximising the show, but then also the follow-up and the follow-through.
That's a nice thing for people to acknowledge really before they start attending. Smart quality. Obviously, you and your husband also run a smart manufacturer, don't you? What's the difference between the two, and why not one business?
Yeah, so Smart Quality Services is actually our company name. So if you look in Companies House, that's what you'll see as a company. And effectively, we have the 2 areas of the business, or the 2 brands, whatever term you want to use. So Smart Quality, which I've been talking about, is the work we do as an independent ISO consultancy, helping companies simply and cost effectively attain and maintain ISO certification. And we work cross-sector with that business. Smart Manufacturer, on the other hand, obviously the clues in the name is we work exclusively with small manufacturing companies, and that's a very different side of the business. We're doing independent manufacturing consultancy, helping companies on the ERP side of the business. So that's why we've kept that as a sort of distinct brand, which we're known for in the manufacturing sector. But it's essentially one company, but 2 sides to it.
Right, okay, that's helpful. ERP and MRP, what's the difference?
Yeah, so a lot of companies use those terms intermittently and don't really understand, what the difference is. ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, has tended to be known more for bigger systems that are all embracing, that sometimes have inbuilt financials, inbuilt HR, whereas the MRP system is much more focused around manufacturing functionality, how you schedule and plan your production. So that intense manufacturing functionality that you get within an MRP system that you wouldn't always get in an ERP system. But the two terms are used interchangeably, really.
Right, so obviously, yeah, similar, but depending on the industry, really.
Yes, there's nuances, but yeah, people do use those terms. We'll say an ERP when they mean an MRP, so it's acronyms again. But it's essentially either is a system that basically and most importantly helps you join your different departments together and give you cross-functional working and having everybody operating, from that language is the single version of the truth. So everyone's working from the same information because it's a common system that goes across the business.
Is there anything you would like to add to the podcast?
Yeah, just one other area. We are continuing, as you know, Richard, from us. We never sit back on our laurels. So we're already always looking at meeting more customer demands and growing the portfolio. So I'm really thrilled to say that we have just signed UK distributorship with a warehouse management software platform, which has been very successful in other geographies, particularly in the Asia Pac region and the US, integrates with a number of ERP systems. So hence the reason that we were courted. So we are now going to be adding that into the portfolio. It's all very new. We have our first big prospect that we're just engaging with, but we see that as a sort of natural extension to what we're already doing.
Well, certainly good news for the future then. Very busy.
Oh, we certainly are, but I like it that way.
I wouldn't want to be. So everyone's always wanting to be busy, don't they? So you don't really want to be quiet and not have nothing.
No, we want to make sure that we've got the widest possible, and offerings for the the target market or markets that we are trying to serve. And for us, it's about making a difference to a business. That's what gets us out of bed every day.
Same for me, really. It's always about what you can add, how you can help. It's always about helping someone else and kind of improving their business. So as much as you can help as you can, I think the better it is. Always a win.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
So it's been great having you on the podcast. It's been great to hear more about smart quality and smart manufacture. Obviously, we talk quite a bit on LinkedIn and obviously at events and stuff. So it's been great to speak up on the podcast as well. So it's great to have you on, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard, for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
If you want more customers, you've got two choices. You either pay for Google Ads or you hope that you're within the top 10 on Google search.
There's over 100,000 manufacturing businesses in the UK, but how do they get found? I had that problem working for an engineering company in Essex with no marketing budget. How could new customers find us?
My name's Kevin and I'm the co-owner of ManufacturersHub, and we've come up with a solution to get your business found online. Join us today to boost your online presence. Click the sign up link.